Hello, friends, and welcome to the May 24th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can engage in the process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Engagement Director, and today's episode is brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas and Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas. And friends, we have almost made it. There is 1 week to go in the 87th Texas Legislature, and this is our last Weekly Witness episode of the session. And it has certainly been a fun ride, I guess it's fair to say, at least in terms of this programming every week at noon. We won't talk about the legislature being fun at this point. But for the last week, things are going to be going very quickly for the next few days. So make sure that you're following Texas Impact and Ledge TV and the Texas Impact team on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and make sure that you join the Texas Impact Rapid Response Team and legislative engagement groups for updates throughout the week. And remember that the work will continue after the legislature ends. So don't feel like you're too late to join those teams if you're only signing up today. You can find more information or sign up at texasimpact.org in the Action Center. As far as Weekly Witness programming goes, we'll be off next week for Memorial Day and Sine Die, which is the last day of the legislative session. But stay tuned for announcements about the upcoming schedule. I know we plan a 4 or 5 week legislative wrap-up series soon after the session ends, so you won't want to miss that. But also, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you want from Weekly Witness during the interim. Let us know what would benefit you, your congregation, and your community. You can reach out to me at scott@texasimpact.org to give us some feedback there. But on to today. We're going to have B. Moorhead joining us for our last Weekly Witness of the session. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. We've been texting and talking all weekend. And so we'll just continue that conversation on air with you today. But before we hear from B, I want to introduce one of my good friends and former colleagues, Reverend Sam Brannon of St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Elgin for the last Weekly Word of Session. Sam, it's good seeing you. I have to say, there are times when I'm out and about and talking to people and they say, I remember when you came and did that presentation on water a few years ago. And I was like, yeah. Not me, but I mean, I guess maybe we look kind of alike. I don't know.
That's all right. And we're brothers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today and looking forward to your Weekly Word. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Brannon, and I am the pastor at St. Peter Lutheran Church here in Elgin, Texas, which is just a little bit to the east of Austin, Texas. And it is a really fantastic place to be, and it's a great place to do ministry. And there is a wonderful faith community out here that's vibrant and alive. And advocacy is a huge piece of ministry here in Elgin. So my input for the Weekly Witness will be just a little bit of the why and a little bit of the what of what it comes, what I think advocacy is and what it means, and so much of that is going to come from Scripture. And so I wanted to open up to the community here. By the way, I have the chat screen open. Am I going to be able to see anybody who chats, who has any questions? I will. So if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask. I only get 3 to 5 minutes, and I don't want to take up all of your time. But if you do have questions, I think it's important that you raise those. And so my favorite advocate in the entire world, of course, was Moses. And Moses was just the greatest. And so there he was, minding his own business, trying to stay out of trouble from Egypt. And so there he is, looking after his sheep. And then the Lord came to him in that burning bush moment, which some of us have had. And the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And the cry of the Israelites has now come to me, and I have seen how they are oppressed, and I will send you. I will send you. And what a set of marching orders Moses got. And of course, it was so incredible that that what happens, thousands of years later, we're still telling that story. And it's a fantastic story about a person who was ill-equipped and who went anyway, and went with the team. Of course, he went with Aaron, and he spoke to power. He spoke truth to power, and that didn't go very well at first, but it turned out well in the end. And so that is what I believe that we as people of faith are called to do, is to speak truth to power. There's a way to do it that's helpful, and there are ways, of course, that are not helpful. And so I think one of the things that Texas Impact does that is really fantastic is they teach people how to be advocates, and how to harness the power of your faith tradition and lead that into the secular world of power. And so that being said, what are some of the things that we are called to do? And that led me into Matthew's gospel, and I thought that would be very helpful. And so here in Matthew 25, Jesus is talking about what it looks like. What is the blueprint for judgment? And God and Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are blessed by the Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. And I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." And these are some, I think, some blueprints that we can follow as people of faith, that allows us to move into any particular place, particularly into the halls of power, and to speak our witness of our faith to those who can certainly do something to provide relief to people who are suffering in our communities. And we have no shortage of people who are suffering. We have people who are they have a terrible time affording healthcare. They have a horrible time affording food, housing, clothing, and we have plenty of people who are in prison and need to be spoken for because they have no voice at all on the outside. And also we need to be about welcoming the stranger, which is very important to us. But as a Christian and as a Lutheran Christian, one of the things that I bring into the advocacy world is this very specific theology I hope that will be helpful. And that is that because Christ died for me, I am compelled by my faith and called and empowered by the gospel to serve my neighbor as a perfectly free servant of all. And that is what we are called to do in this time. We are called to go out into the world, and we are called to serve our neighbors as perfectly free servants of all. And that is my freedom. That is the freedom that I get out of my faith. That is the freedom that I got because Jesus died for me. And that is what my faith tells me. I will say that there are images of advocacy in the Bible of things not to do. And I would like to remind you that the sons of thunder, James and John, came to Jesus and they said, "We want you to do for us whatever we ask you to do." And Jesus is like, "Okay, well, you guys go ahead and tell me what you want." And of course, they wanted power. And that is the image of, I think that's the negative image of advocacy, that we're not called to amass power for ourselves. We're not called to ask anything for ourselves, but we are called to ask for other people, and we are called to serve other people. And so that is, for me, the kind of the rundown, the blueprint, the central core of advocacy. And if you have any questions, I'd certainly love to answer those.
All right, Sam, that was a really good word. You and I worked together for a long time, and I don't know why it took us until now to think about the fact that we should start our Mondays with a weekly word from Texas clergy. And I've really appreciated this segment throughout session. Really appreciate getting a chance to catch up with you and hearing a word from one of my favorite Lutheran pastors as he checks the participant list to make sure he's not offending anyone today. So thank you so much for your ministry, and thanks for being on with us today.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
All right. Next, we'll welcome to the conversation Texas Impact's Executive Director, B. Moorhead. Josh is in the Capitol helping close out the legislative session. And so we are excited to have B with us today. B, it has been a long week since we were together with our Weekly Witness family. A lot has happened over the course of the last week, huh?
That is true. And Josh is in the Capitol working. And just so that people have a flavor, I want to say what your Texas Impact team are doing today. Sarah is not in the Capitol working. She is at the border with our first crew of Courts and Ports registrants since we've started opening that program back up. So Courts and Ports is now open. You can go on our website and register for a trip. And Phil says, hooray, Phil Dickey and Alex Lee Cornell and one other Neil, I forgot Neil's last name, Neil Mosley, went to the border on a reconnaissance trip a couple of weeks ago with Sarah and Sid, and they came back and we figured out how to get that program going again, and now it is. So we're excited about that. While Josh is in the building working, we have Mary and Joseph, our two theologically named communications folks, who are pulling the clips from the legislative session that help people watch what happened and understand it, in some cases long time later, some cases right away, sometimes years or decades later. We can go back to those clips and say, oh, I remember what happened then. As I'm in this screen with you guys on Weekly Witness, on another screen I'm watching, and I know that what they are clipping is the debate on a bill about open carry of weapons. And so I think if people who are watching Weekly Witness, when you're done watching that, you can just flip over to Twitter and you'll see some posts going up on Ledge TV about what's going on in the Capitol. But I guess what I'm here to do is to talk to you. I guess I want to say also, Emma, as everyone else is doing all the things they're doing, Emma is keeping the ship afloat, keeping us on track operationally. So everybody at Texas Impact is fully engaged and super busy, I guess. I just want to start there.
So yeah, the Texas Impact team is certainly busy. The legislature is also busy. And I'll note for those who are listening by podcast that we're recording this at noon on Monday. And so by the time you listen to this, things might have changed significantly. So we hope that you are part of the legislative engagement group or rapid response team so you can get updates throughout the week. But as we stand right now, we're beginning the last week of the Texas legislature. They will end their session next Monday on Memorial Day. Can you walk us through kind of what typically happens or what we should be expecting during the last week of a legislative session in typical times?
I mean, I kind of can. I have some things that I want to say, though. Mm-hmm. What happens during the last week of a legislative session is kind of non-linear. It depends on the legislative session. It depends on what the nature of the big issues that are left. I mean, always you get down to the end of the session and all of the personal and partisan conflicts, all those fault lines are wide open, and everyone can see, like, the deals that need to get made are deals that have to do with some soothing people's feelings or helping people reconcile a vote that they don't want to make on one piece of legislation for something that they really want to get done in another venue. So there's a lot. There is a lot of stuff going on that isn't really the stuff the public is party to. It's a lot of inside the building activity. I don't remember a session. I'm sure that there have been, and you know, it's kind of an elegant fiction, right? We always say, oh, this is the most complicated session or the worst session ever. Pretty much everybody says that this week, and in a couple weeks people will say, remember the session, all the great things that happened, right? And we're all you know, the amnesia sets in pretty quickly. But I don't remember a session where such an array of issues that don't really have anything to do with each other, they're all so sort of existential for Texas, all were kind of arrayed like they are. We have, with respect to issues Texas Impact has bills where we're supporting things we care about, where we were supporting legislation. The George Floyd Act, the bill itself is not going to pass. It doesn't have any path to passing. There are still several parts of it that would have a path. It's a narrow path, and it's kind of increasingly narrowing as this week goes on. It'll, you know, we hope that something passes before it narrows to zero. On Medicaid expansion, the big bill, again, there's not any path to any form of taking the federal money and expanding Medicaid, but there are still these two bills, House Bill 290 and House Bill 133, that are basically expansion of the existing coverage for existing covered people. One would get rid of red tape. House Bill 290 would get rid of the red tape that keeps children and their families having to re-enroll in Medicaid every 6 months. And House Bill 133, as it was originally introduced in the House, would have given women who had just had a baby a year of postpartum coverage instead of the few weeks that they have currently. The Senate has changed that to 6 months. I think that likely means there will be a conference committee on that bill, but maybe not. I want to say about that House Bill 290, this is not a bill that makes anybody eligible who's not already. It's about children. And I think the most offensive thing about that whole issue is that Texas Impact has been supporting making that coverage 12 months of continuous eligibility for at least 15 years. That's been a live legislative issue. And it is 12 months for CHIP, for the Children's Health Insurance Program. So it is a subset of the children who get federally funded health insurance in Texas who somehow are subject to red tape and onerous restrictions that other children who get federally supported health care are not. And I think it, from a constituent standpoint, as people listen to this, maybe not this week, but as they listen to it in a few weeks, as they listen to it in a few months, they need to really think about the conversations that they have with legislators, how much they are able to probe with legislators, what really makes you vote the way that you do on this issue? What makes you choose one group of kids over another? What is it about them that makes this issue so apparently unresolvable for Texas after all this time? So you get those two issues, the Medicaid and George Floyd, where
let me pause you there real quick, just to remind folks kind of where those are. So they both passed the House of Representatives, right? I should say not both, all 5 of those bills that you referenced. So the George Floyd Act, those are House bills, or the component pieces of the George Floyd Act. Those are House bills 829, 830, and 834. And then B, you mentioned the two Medicaid
House
related
Bill
bills.
290 and House Bill 133.
Right. And so the action on those, if you want to try to shake them loose, like if you want to call ASAP, is to call your senator, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Continue. Just wanted to make sure we're giving people things to do on them.
So a raid on the other side on things that Texas Impact actively opposes that we've been working hard to oppose.
A longer list.
A longer list, unfortunately, a longer list. We've got Senate Bill 7, which is the bill that we would refer to as the omnibus voter suppression bill, is in conference committee. It's going to come back out soon, we assume. It is not sort of technically too late to call your House member and say, make sure you stick as close as possible to the House version. It's less bad than the Senate version. I think it's more on that legislation. It is time for people in local communities all over the state to start thinking really, really proactively and strategically about how they will work together to ensure that people in their community are able to vote safely according to their constitutional right in the upcoming November election. I feel fortunate in Texas that we have sort of a tester election, a November constitutional election before the high stakes primaries that happen next spring. For that November election, I hope as people are, if your congregation is anything like mine, we're, deeply involved in this conversation about how we're going to open back up, when we're going to start meeting in person. Everybody's thinking hard about what are we going to do in the fall. Very forward orientation in congregational thinking right now. Make part of that be, how will our congregation put out there right now that we want to be part of whatever the network of congregations is in our community that wants to support our local election administrators in making the election available to all the people who want to vote, who are allowed to vote. And that, I think, would be a better approach than focusing on how mad you are at the legislation when it passes, because whatever it is, it's going to be bad. And whatever it is, it's going to be passing. And your phone call is probably not going to prevent that from happening. So make sure that you can make a phone call in 6 months to your legislator and tell them, my congregation was courageous and went forward and helped people vote. So that's what I have to say about the voting. On the trans bullying bills, Josh tells me, I'm sorry if I sound a little bit distracted. I'm trying to text Josh to get up to the minute information. Josh tells me that Senate Bill 29, which is the ban on trans sports, is the one that is on is the most still viable. It is on the major state calendar for tomorrow in the House. So am I allowed to post something in the chat?
You can certainly post something in the chat. I'll remind you though that most people will listen by podcast.
No, I know, but for the people who are watching right now, I mean, these are the people for whom this is the most important immediately. This is where you can see, oh, nuts, that went to just the panelists.
I'll get it.
Okay. This is where you can see the calendars. So for people who are listening, you can go to the Capitol website, capitol.texas.gov. And one of the things you can find there is the calendars for the House and Senate. And the reason I think it's important for folks to look at the calendars right now, especially, is that you'll notice that there are different, there's different levels of calendars. So there are calendars, there's the general state calendar, which is the ongoing list of bills in the order that they're supposed to be taken up. There are calendar items that are called items eligible. It's items that were in a conference committee that where they've come back from the conference committee and they are ready to get voted on, either to they've been passed by the other chamber. So they're bills that are sort of at a point in the process where they're on a different deadline than most bills. Each one of them would have its own kind of individual timeline. And when the amount of time that they needed to ripen on the calendar, so to speak, has passed, they can come up at any point. So the speaker could say, we're going to take up some items eligible. And you might be watching and thinking, but I thought the next item on the calendar was number whatever. And suddenly they're jumping around. You need to know that that's what they do. They can jump around to other things. Well, there's one calendar called Major State that is the priority bills. So if a bill is on the Major State calendar, that calendar has to come ahead of the general calendar. So an item could be placed on Major State after another item was already placed on the general calendar, and it could still come up first. One of the things that means is that if a bill is on Major State and it's coming ahead, so you saw the bill you cared about coming up and it was on the general calendar and you thought, maybe they'll go ahead and get to this because it's on the general calendar. Well, if the bill that's on Major State ahead of that takes a lot of time, that may make it less likely that they get to your smaller but meaningful bill that you cared about that's on the general calendar. That makes members not want to delay those items on the Major State calendar. They might say, for example, Senate Bill 29, I sure don't like that. I think it's a bad idea. I want to have a big argument about it. But if I argue about it for a long time, it's going to make it less likely that we can get to this smaller bill that I thought was really going to do some good for, a few people who are on community supervision or who are special education students or whatever the thing might be, right? So it's going to be hard for the House not to work its way through Senate Bill 29, I would say probably approaching impossible. So that bill is likely to pass. So that's not good news.
Let me pause there and ask, because I know somebody will be thinking this question. I feel y'all. Who decides what those priority bills that get on the Major State calendar will be? Like who made that decision that this issue is a priority?
The people who made that decision, who voted, who cast the vote to put it on that calendar, are the House Calendars Committee. And the chair of the House Calendars Committee is Representative Dustin Burrows. However, I think it's not fair. It is neither fair for constituents or for the voters to blame everything on Representative Burrows and say, if he wanted to do it differently, he just could have, because he is under pressure from lots of different places. It's also not fair to say, well, there wasn't anything he could do about it because this all was a decision that was made at a higher level. Well, that's not fair either. The chair of calendars is a high level position, and if the chair of calendars decides we're not going to do something, they have a certain amount of opportunity to prevent it from happening. And the individual members of calendars do too. And I would suggest to you that those are people who often, when you think about someone who casts a vote that immediately results in political retribution, I would point you to Debbie Riddle, an extremely conservative member who at the last meeting of calendars, at the last possible moment, cast the deciding vote not to target the Muslim community. I believe was the bill that it finally was the one. Although if Josh were here, he could correct me if that wasn't the one. But drew her an opponent and she lost her seat. She lost her seat over that calendars vote, even though she was a very, very conservative member. So that's so who's telling calendars what bills need to pass? Well, other members. So the other members of the House say, whatever you do, please pass my bill. It's really important in my district. If that bill doesn't pass, I'm going to get a challenge, and it's going to, and you know how well we've worked together all this time, right? So there's that. The lieutenant governor, the governor, and the speaker all would exert pressure on that calendars committee and say, you know, if you know what's good for you, you will make sure that this bill gets on the calendar. The calendars committee can't make legislators vote for that legislation, but in this particular case, Senate Bill 29, and you could do a poll today, and the majority of members on the House floor probably will say, yeah, I'll vote for it because it's a priority issue for my party in this session.
Yeah,
so that's how it works.
I think that's helpful. And I know we've sent action alerts out in the past that said something along the lines of call your representative today and ask them to ask calendars to do X. And I think your explanation was good. But I think at the end of the day, like when we look back on the session, one of the questions we'll have to ask is, did the legislature prioritize the bills that were most important to our communities, right? And I would certainly argue that there were probably bigger priorities that we should have gotten to.
So, I mean, that raises a couple of things. It raises a lot of things, but one of them is the bill that they were on before, right when Weekly Witness started, was Senate Bill 20, which is a bill that forces hotel owners to let people have handguns in their rooms. The bill was amended yesterday to ensure that it's not just handguns, but that people are allowed to carry long guns. I feel like, any kind of gun you can imagine that someone could have. I don't know Sam has a military background. I don't. If I say machine guns, I assume that's not the right term. But guns that function like a machine, that fire a lot of bullets, all in a very rapid order, carry those guns through the hotel lobby, through the parking lot, through the hotel lobby, through the hallway to their room. That bill has passed, and I'm assuming that amendment went on so that it, yes, war weapons. Thank you. That's right. That bill, I think we heard, it doesn't matter what I say, we have video of legislators saying extremely eloquently how much that is not in the interest of our community. Same thing with House Bill 1927 that passed last night, which was the one that 1927 or 1925. They're getting confusing for me. Scott's gonna look. That the permitless carry legislation. So you don't have to have a permit to carry. What legislators would say who voted for that legislation that we would say is not in the interest of communities but apparently it is, because members of the community that I represent, which includes you, constituent, other members of the community said this is what they want. So some of the advocacy is about making sure that they understand that you oppose or you support, that you are not on the same side as that everyone in the community isn't unanimous in that view, right? So we had one piece of legislation yesterday where I had a text conversation with a member where I said, hey, that you voted in a way that Texas Impact did not agree with. I wonder why, because we usually agree. And that member said, oh, I misunderstood and I never heard from y'all or whatever. And so that's, that's on us. If we didn't vigorously let the legislator know that we had a position on an issue. But once the legislature's done, the other part is to turn back out to your community and have the conversations in your community. Because if your legislator supported guns in hotels or whatever, they didn't do it only under their own steam. They did it because other people were asking them to. And you can't just assume that it's not just two bilateral conversations between you and the legislature and them and the legislator, and whoever has the better, smarter conversation is going to win, and that's just it. It's got to be between the three parties, you, your legislator, and the people in your community that you disagree with. And that is the hard conversation to have. Our congregations are better placed than anyone else in the community to be a safe space where those conversations can happen. Nevertheless, it's an act of real bravery to put yourself out there and say, we want to be the place where people come together to talk about stuff we know for sure they disagree, in some cases violently, about.
So I will predict that we will have many, many conversations over the next few months about the need to have those conversations. Yep. With members and maybe candidates too. Anything else you're watching over the course of the next few days?
I am watching my grandson who's home with a cold.
For those who are watching live, you get an extra treat today.
Yeah. But anything else we are watching over the course of the next few days? Yes. The main one that I want to bring up, actually there's two. One is renewable energy, which has been, I want to say, inexplicably to me, under attack this session. And it's inexplicable why anyone wants to attack it. I mean, I suppose I can understand that it's an industry versus industry thing, but it is incomprehensible how quickly legislators and interested parties were able to exploit the February storm and make it into an attack on renewable energy, which wasn't really responsible for much of the power problems that we had. And anyone who thinks it is should take note that we don't have that much of it for it to have been the primary problem in the first place. So there's just a kind of a long list of bills that are potential vehicles for anti-renewable amendments. And I want to say Texas Impact sometimes is able to spend, weeks and months gearing people up for a bill number or a legislative proposal, where when we say, okay, this is the bill number, you remember we've talked about this, everyone says, oh, I totally get it. We're now in the position in this last week where we will be sending out a rapid response that says there is an anti-renewable amendment and it is on this bill, and you are going to have to trust us that really is what it is, and hopefully people will make those calls. So renewables, we're going to be protecting them up until the end of the session. And preemption, which is sort of the general idea that if the legislature doesn't like something that some local communities are doing, like requiring that employees get water breaks if it's hot outside, or making policies related to camping bans or things like that, or payday lending ordinances, which our members have been particularly interested in over the years, that the legislature can make a law that says nobody's allowed to do that. Even though, you wanted this to be a state law, and we decided not to do it. So we decided not to protect people who get payday loans on a statewide basis. So your local community said, well, at least we'll protect them here in our town. And the legislature says, nope, you actually can't protect them in your town either. That's what preemption is. The legislature is in the process of trying to preempt any number of kinds of activities that local governments try to do to get some, to impose some kind of order within their own boundaries. We're watching for all of that as well. And similarly, if we say this is a preemption thing, you need to say no. Preemption is the legislature's way of saying, remember what I just said, that you need to have those conversations in your local community, and your congregation can be a safe space where people can have those conversations if they really disagree with each other. And you in your local community can come to some sort of compromise, consensus, meeting of the minds. The preemption is the way the legislature says, yes, but since the majority of us don't necessarily agree with where you landed, we're going to undermine you. It's vicious for community, the future of community relations.
A question in the chat about Senate Bill 1728, which is the electric vehicle tax.
I saw that, and I do not know the answer to that question. We can definitely find out, Stephanie.
It's on the calendar. So it is placed on the calendar in the House. So if you're interested in that, calls to the House.
Yeah.
So anything else you're watching over the course of the next, 48 hours before everything changes and we have a whole new list?
The other thing I'm watching, and I really encourage people, if you have time to spend watching Scott and me talk off the cuff for several minutes about the legislature, you surely have time to watch the legislature for several minutes as they talk about things at a very high level in a very high stakes environment. I'm watching the legislators, especially in the House. I will tell you that they seem so tired and so, in many cases, dejected, and not just liberal Democrats. I mean, across the board, this has been a draining and demoralizing experience. And we got a question here about how to watch the legislature besides Ledge TV. Yeah, actually, Ledge TV, we will show you the parts we wanted you to see, but to watch the legislature, if you go to capitol.texas.gov, on the homepage there, on the right column, so there's 3 columns of content, and in the right column, there's access the mobile versions of TLO. TLO is the Texas Legislature Online. And then the next thing down says legislative activity, video broadcasts. So if you click on the House or Senate there, video broadcasts will get you to the video that's going on, and as well as the archive of what's already happened.
Yeah, and to make that easier if you want, I just Google Texas House of Representatives live video, and it's right there, or same with the Senate.
That's very handcrafted of you.
Hey, and then it says in my little tabs for 6 months at a time until my computer restarts or something. And I've seen B screen when she shares.
Don't even start with that. Don't talk about how many tabs I have open.
So I can't say anything. I just know that I have the same problem. So kind of to summarize, if you're looking to make telephone calls right now, Monday. So if you're calling the Senate, calling your senator, you're asking them to support the 3 component bills of the George Floyd Act, House Bill 830, 834, and 829, and the 2 Medicaid bills, House Bill 133 and 290. We also want you to call your representative ASAP to oppose Senate Bill 29, which is the anti-trans bill we talked about, oppose any anti-renewable amendments and any preemption efforts. Is that a decent summary to start the week? And then we'll provide rapid response updates from there.
Yeah, the rapid response updates are going to be rapid. Rapid.
Almost a time or two this week.
Hey, I don't know how much you've done this yet, but can I just say the rapid response that you all, the Weekly Witness crew, have been doing over the course of this session has been fantastic. If whatever anyone has to say about reasons things didn't go their way in this legislative session, it will not be because you all sat back and didn't do anything. In a session when it was so hard you couldn't go to the Capitol because of COVID, we're all going to forget about that really quickly. We're going to look at those pictures of ourselves in masks on Zoom and think, geez, why do we do it that way? I can't even remember how. Then you all have made what, 5,500 phone calls and you've signed thousands of sign-ons. I'm so impressed, and I know that legislators are too. And you should not confuse not getting the outcome you want at the Capitol with not having an impact. You all have absolutely had an impact, and I think we want to just potentiate that as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think that's an appropriate way to start closing out this last weekly witness session of the Texas legislature, is just to say that it has been an honor to be able to be a part of this community with you over the course of the last 20 weeks. You have done incredible work. We have learned many, many things from your telephone calls and your reporting back to us that have helped make an impact in the building. And there's still a week to go. And so we're going to push as hard as we can for one more week. And I've said it a couple of times, and I don't know that I should say it with the boss on, but we've worked really hard for 20 weeks. We're going to work hard for one more week, and then we're all going to take a breath, right? And we're going to take a week away next week, and then we'll regather ourselves and start to figure out what we do post-session over the course of the next 18 months until we gather again for the 88th Texas legislature. But know that there is going to be work to do in the interim. It's going to look different. We want your feedback on how to best do that. But we're really looking forward to the next steps in this process as well. So stay tuned for what comes next. It's been a fun ride, and I'm sure what comes next will also be fun. So be anything to say before we close out today?
I'm just grateful for all these folks, and I was so excited to see Sam Brannon's smiling face here today too. But yeah, you guys are amazing. Texas is lucky to have all of you.
All right, friends, one more week. Remember, we won't be with you next week, but look forward to rejoining you in the weeks to come after that, and really looking forward to the legislative recap where we can see what all came out of the mess of this last few weeks. So thanks again for tuning in today. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, B, for being part of the conversation today. Friends, you are amazing, but I hope you remember that if you appreciate Texas Impact and the work of the Weekly Witness community, please make sure that you and your congregation are members. You can join today by going to texasimpact.org/join. Friends, we are closing out our time together today, but that just means that the work for this week begins. We hope that you'll make your telephone calls. We hope that you'll subscribe to Texas Impact in all forms, and we hope that you'll invite your friends to join and subscribe to this content as well. Now is the time, friends, for you and your congregations to be active and engaged. So let's get to work.